I'm so pleased to have Wayne Dornan as my first guest today on our show. As you saw, author, consultant, and breast cancer survivor. Nice to have you here today with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And here is his book, How I Survived Breast Cancer, written by Wayne. You said your first book, of course, you've been an academic, so you'd written a lot of articles, but I imagine this was somewhat cathartic for you, too, to write this book about your experience. And as a man going through breast cancer treatment, I imagine you still would encounter people who would say, what?
Absolutely.
A man getting breast cancer? Share with us some of the numbers and,
Sure.
and kind of the feedback you get from people.
Okay, well, actually, I was one of those men because at the time I had the diagnosis, I had no clue that men could get breast cancer. And to give you an example, this year they estimate that about 250,000 women in the United States will be diagnosed with invasive breast cancer. And you compare that to about 3,400 men. So there's a huge difference in the number of cases of women compared to men. So what that translates into, though, is that most men are not aware that they can get breast cancer. And what happens then is when they finally do go to a doctor and are diagnosed with breast cancer, the stage, which ranges from stage 1 to 4, and the higher the number, the worse the diagnosis, their stage is higher compared to women, and as a result their prognosis is poor. So we've really got to get the word out to men that we have breasts too, and if we have breasts, we can get breast cancer.
And you share this experience, I would imagine, in great detail. I've just skimmed through this a little bit just now, but what you've been through, I see, you know, there's some pictures in here, and hormone receptor positive, some charts, various things. Why was it important for you to write this book and to share this?
Well, from the very beginning when I was diagnosed, I knew I was going to write a book, because one of the things I realized very quickly is that there was a lack of information out there for men. I researched the literature, and there was absolutely no publications and no books about male breast cancer. So I wanted to get that out. I wanted to share my specific journey because, to be honest, when I was first diagnosed, I was embarrassed. I felt that, well, why couldn't I have been diagnosed with a male form of breast cancer? In my wildest dreams, I did not ever think that I was going to be diagnosed with breast cancer. So I wanted to share that personal story, that it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's a disease that you have to deal with just like anything else, and you have to come out and try and get information about what's going on within you. The second reason why I wanted to write the book was because even in women, there's a lot of misconceptions about breast cancer. So being an academic with 35 years of experience in research, I wanted to go into the scientific literature and then put in some factual information into that book to say, you know what? Breast cancer is bad, there's no doubt about it, but the treatment within the last decade has changed dramatically, and so has survival rates, and I wanted to put that in the book.
So that is encouraging to people as well.
Absolutely.
Like, don't be afraid and neglect getting a mammogram or treatment because you think, well, what if I do have it? It's a death sentence. It's not.
No, absolutely not.
What were your symptoms? How were you diagnosed?
Well, I had really no symptoms until about 3 days before I was diagnosed. I was in the shower, and just like a typical male, I'm not doing self-examinations. I'm just going through life worrying about testicular cancer, not breast cancer. And I was in the shower, and I noticed that my left breast felt different. And when I got out of the shower, I went to the mirror, and I looked, and my nipple was inverted. And that is, little did I know at the time, that's a telltale sign of breast cancer. So I inherited hypochondria from my mother, and so I didn't put it off because most men put those things off. And I immediately called my physician. This was a Friday morning, went to see him. He sent me to get a mammogram, and most centers don't do mammograms on men for obvious reasons. They do ultrasounds. So I had the ultrasound done on Friday afternoon. It came back suspicious. I was referred to a surgeon on Monday morning, and he saw my breast and did a biopsy. On Wednesday, which was my birthday, I was in surgery.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a
quick
whirlwind.
Whirlwind. So recommendations, you brought up mammograms, ultrasound in your case. What are the recommendations for mammograms? For women, they begin typically at 45, typically. For men, when do they recommend you start or have them?
It's very interesting that you bring that up, because I was at a conference, a survivor conference in Washington, D.C. about 3 weeks ago. And there were a bunch of advocates that were there with scientists, and the role of the conference was to get us both together. Because sometimes the scientists are so deep in the weeds of what they're doing, they lose the perspective of what they're working on. And so that was the motivation behind the conference. And so each advocate stood up and talked about his or her, well, it was just one male, and it was all women, about our diagnosis of breast cancer. And I had a woman come up to me just before the plenary session and say, you know, I have 2 sons. I've had breast cancer. My mother died of breast cancer, and my grandmother died of breast cancer. What do I do with my sons? I said to her, they're high risk. They need to know that they are high risk, and they need to do annual examinations.
Let's, in our last 30 seconds, this has gone so quickly, let's go over other risk factors real quickly in the last about 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, there's some risk factors that you can't do anything about. That's age, ethnicity, and gender. But one of the biggest risk factors for breast cancer that is a strong association is obesity. Get out there, exercise, watch your weight, and that will go a long way for you avoiding getting diagnosed with breast cancer.
All right, we could go on and on. I wish we had more time. Wayne Dornan, thank you.
You're
How I
very welcome.
Survived Breast Cancer is his book. Thank you for sharing your experience, and we're glad to know you're doing well.
My pleasure. Thank you very
Wayne.
much.
All right, we'll be right back.